The head of the Russian mercenary Wagner Group is denying an explosive new report in the Washington Post that he allegedly offered to share intelligence with Ukraine on Russian troop positions. This would be in exchange for Kyiv pulling its troops from the area surrounding the embattled city of Bakhmut. That's where Wagner has taken some heavy losses. CNN's Sam Kiley joins us now live from southeastern Ukraine. And Sam, this report comes from previously unreported leaked U.S. intelligence documents. Tell us more.
So it's a very weird story indeed, but essentially it relates to Prigozhin allegedly making contact with the intelligence chiefs in Kyiv and, as you say, offering to reveal to his enemies or to his country's enemies the positions of their troops in return for allowing his people from his mercenary company to come under less pressure in Bakhmut. Now, this overture, according to these documents, was rejected by the Ukrainians who, funnily enough, didn't trust the leader of a mercenary organization that is on the verge of being designated a terrorist organization by the French Parliament, among others. But at the same time, he also has rejected this allegation, saying that the meeting that was supposed to bring this about had occurred between himself and the Ukrainian intelligence officers somewhere in Africa. He's claiming that he has never actually set foot in Africa during the whole period of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, so couldn't have been attending that meeting. It's a very murky story indeed. There is no proof positive one way or the other. This is US intelligence that's been unverified. But I think it's also partly, potentially now, even if it wasn't designed as such, playing into the psychological operations ahead of what is assumed to be a major summer offensive from the Ukrainians, sowing discord, and this certainly does just that in the ranks of the Russians. The Russian government has dismissed this as a hoax, but they won't entirely do so privately. Jake.
All right, Sam Kiley in Ukraine for us. Thank you so much. Joining us now is former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch. She's the author of the book Lessons from the Edge, a memoir. It is now out in paperback. We had her when it came out in hardback. Always, and a great book. Very recommended, highly recommended. So what is your reaction to this explosive reporting from the Post that the head of the Wagner Group, Prigozhin, offered to give Ukraine the location of Russian troops? Do you believe it?
It's really hard to know, Jake. I mean, just when you think you can't be surprised anymore by things coming out of Russia, you can be surprised. But clearly, I mean, there's been, Prigozhin has been on the outs with those in the defense ministry. And,
Why is he on the outs with them? I mean, his mercenary group is in there. I mean, I hate what they're doing, but they're in there fighting.
Yeah, I think they're scorpions in a bottle. I mean, they're fighting, presumably they're all on the same side. But they're all like trying to advance themselves as well in the eyes of Putin, right? Yeah. And Putin plays one off against the other. So I think, I think it's a pretty tense situation there.
Russia's poured vast amounts of resources, obviously, into this war and manpower, but they're still struggling. 2 senior Russian military officers were killed yesterday in eastern Ukraine. Russia admitted that uncharacteristically. And that comes a day after Kyiv shot down 4 Russian military aircraft near the border. How much longer do you think Putin can afford to wage this war?
Well, I think that he's determined to keep on going. And so the price in terms of blood and treasure is not an obstacle for him, at least not at this point that we can see.
Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, he's touring Europe right now trying to get more weapons, heavy weaponry especially, as well as financial aid and other assistance for his fight. Today, the UK promised to train Ukrainian fighter pilots, but they're not giving them the actual planes. Do you think that Europe is doing enough to help Ukraine?
I think Europe is doing a lot, just as the U.S. is doing even more. But we need to keep on giving Ukraine more and more quickly so that Ukraine can win. I mean, that's important for Ukraine, obviously, for existential issues, but it's also important for the West.
If you were president right now, I'm making you president right now, hypothetically, what would you do for Ukraine that we're not doing?
That's a really good question because, so I just levied this criticism, but I think partly what we're seeing is a logistical miracle in terms of getting Abrams tanks to Germany this month and then onto Ukraine. So I think the Biden administration and Europe in general and Germany just over the weekend in terms of the $3 billion package are doing a great job, but we need to do more and more of the same. And looking at other systems as well. Should we follow the UK lead, for example, with longer range missiles? Should we be thinking about fighters and so forth? I think these are all very valid questions.
So your book, Lessons from the Edge, among the stories it tells, and it tells a lot, it talks about how when you were ambassador to Ukraine during the Trump administration, you were ultimately fired after you refused to pledge loyalty to Trump. You write about that in the book. I want to get your reaction to comments that Mr. Trump made about Ukraine last week at the CNN town hall.
If I'm president, I will have that war settled in 1 day, 24 hours.
How would you settle that war in 1 day?
Because I'll meet with Putin, I'll meet with Zelensky. They both have weaknesses and they both have strengths. And within 24 hours, that war will be settled. It'll be over. It'll be absolutely over.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I don't think in terms of winning and losing.
Now, Zelensky responded to that, noting that obviously Russia was at war with Ukraine during all 4 years that Trump was president. They hadn't sieged the whole country. They just seized some of the area to the east as well as Crimea. But how did you take his remarks?
Well, I think it's Trump being Trump, where he makes statements that aren't necessarily tethered to reality.
Yeah. He also said at one point that he and Putin had talked about Putin invading Ukraine. And do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, who knows if it's true or not. I'd love to know more. Former Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, author of the great book Lessons from the Edge, a memoir now out in paperback. Thank you so much for being here. Good to see you.
Thanks.